I look out and I see all the real Americans, I think about how Donald Trump, his family was compromised. When I look out there and I see Donald Trump, I think about how his business was compromised. But what happened last week when they took a shot at my hero and they tried to kill the next president of the United States? Enough was enough. And I said, let Trumpomania run wild, brother. Let Trumpomania rule again. Let Trumpomania make America great again. You know something, Trumpites? I didn't come here as Hulk Hogan, but I just had to give you a little taste. You know, my name is Terry Bollea. And as an entertainer, I love you too. And as an entertainer, I tried to stay out of politics. But after everything that's happened to our country over the past 4 years, and everything that happened last weekend, I can no longer stay silent. I'm here tonight because I want the world to know that Donald Trump is a real American hero. And I'm proud to support my hero as the next president of this United States.
Hi, perhaps you recognize me. It's your favorite president.
We will decide who comes to this country and the circumstances in which they come.
Anybody in this country doesn't minimize their tax. They want their heads ring.
You're gambling with the lives of millions of people. You're gambling with World War III.
The answer is Mike, because I want to do you slowly.
I was saved by God to make America great again.
We shall fight in the fields and in the streets. We shall fight in the hills. We shall never surrender.
G'day everyone, welcome back to another episode of Commanding the Narrative. My name is Stephen Tripp. Thank you to everyone who is watching this. If you are watching this on YouTube, Facebook or Rumble Live, you can contribute to today's conversation in the chat. And the link to StreamYard is also in the chat if you want to call in and ask a question and have your say, maybe go on a rant, whatever you want to do. Please call in. We always like to hear from our audience. It makes the interviews much better when we have an interactive episode. So please don't be shy. And we want to hear from you in the comments and maybe also if you want to call in. Now, we've got a great guest on the show today with a lot to discuss. But before we get there, I'm going to let you know about how you can follow us and support us. And the best way to do it is by heading to commandingthenarrative.com. Now, if you head there, you can hit the sign up button in the top right hand corner and you'll get a regular newsletter from me. You can also keep up to date with all the podcasts that we've done in the recent weeks, any articles or newsletters that go out, and also upcoming events. If you want to know who's on the podcast this week, head to commandingthenarrative.com and you can find all that information there. It's got all the links to Facebook and Rumble and YouTube so you can watch it live. And it's really the best way to follow us. Don't rely on social media anymore because we're probably shadow banned in so many different ways. Head straight to the website. And when you're there, also, if you want, please hit the donate button at the top and contribute to us. It helps to pay for the stream. It helps to pay for the website. And most importantly, gives me a very warm and fuzzy feeling inside, which is very, very important. Now, also, I want to let you know about Australians for Better Government. Now, Australians for Better Government has been running hot this week. Kevin Lockray was interviewed on 2GB with Ben Fordham, also on Chris Smith's show on 2SM, and a whole host of other radio shows in Victoria and also South Australia. So he's been running hot. So it's all about what we've got on the screen right now. Australians for Better Government. You can download our prospectus by clicking this image here. And also, I need to let you know about the upcoming event on the Gold Coast, the Endless Horizons event on Sunday, August 3rd from 1 o'clock. Now, we've got Senator Malcolm Roberts speaking, Senator Jared Rennick, and also Dr. Christopher Reynolds. It's at the CSI Club Southport in Southport on the Gold Coast. Tickets have been really going very, very well. So a lot of people have reached out to me and asked, can we pay cash at the door? Can we buy tickets at the door? Yes, you can, provided that this doesn't sell out beforehand. So you do run that risk. The best way is to get your tickets beforehand, and that's by heading to australiansforbetter.com and find that link there. And also, while you're at the website, click this button here and take our ABG feedback survey. It's a quick and easy survey that you can fill in just so we get some feedback about the people that are supporting ABG and also your views on different issues. We want to hear from you. And as Kevin said when he was on the radio this week, anything that ABG promotes, really the ultimate decision is up to the Australian people. And we're just putting ideas out there. We don't always agree internally about some of these ideas, but it's all about promoting these views so the Australian people can make the informed decision. And this survey is part of that. So please head to australiansforbetter.com and do that survey. And also, we want to see you in the Gold Coast as well. Also, quickly, I'll let you know about Let's Rethink Renewables. Some exciting things are happening there as well. Again, Let's Rethink Renewables has an event coming up in September, on September 14th, again at the CSI Club Southport. I'm going to be releasing more details about speakers and things like that over the coming weeks. So please stay tuned if you're on the Gold Coast or in the area. Maybe you're in Brisbane or Tweed or wherever. Also, there's the Let's Rethink Renewables prospectus on the website that you can download and distribute out to people as well. And also you can sign up to be a member. It's only about $10, or it's only $10 a year. It helps to fund everything that we're doing at Let's Rethink Renewables. And I've got a very, very important survey, or Let's Rethink Renewables has a very important survey coming out probably over the weekend that I want to talk maybe a little bit about today, but I'll be talking about over the coming weeks with some very, very interesting results. And lastly, I just want to give a big shout out to Graham Hood and John Larder of the Club Grubbery podcast. I was on there this week speaking to these great gentlemen about Australians for Better Government. So if you follow Club Grubbery, please head to their channel and check out that interview. But today I've got another podcaster, another, I guess you would call it an independent journalist. He's a former political candidate. He ran in Patterson in the 2022 federal election. He is the host of the 51st State, and he's also the now ex-host of the Daily Australian. I was only on the Daily Australian a week or so ago, so it's going to be very, very interesting to hear his thoughts on what's happened there. So let's bring him on. Jason Olbourne, welcome to Commanding the Narrative, mate.
Well, thanks, Steve. Good to see you, and happy Friday, everyone. Tell you what, a lot's going on. That event that you've got up in the Goldie, that's going to be terrific.
We are very excited about it, and it seems like a lot of people are very excited about it as well because the ticket sales are really doing well. We had an event in Sydney only a month or so ago, and 2 weeks out, we had only sold one ticket because I think a lot of people like to buy their tickets at the last minute or at least in the last week. And we ended up getting over 60 people there. So, this event, we've actually sold more than 60 tickets already. So the room only hosts 130 people. So it's looking like it's going to be close to capacity. So as I said, if you're thinking about coming to that event, get your tickets now. Don't rely on rocking up at the door because unfortunately maybe we'll be sold out and there's constraints with the room. We can't just put as many people in there as we would like. There's a lot of laws and regulations that we have to adhere to. But anyway, it's going to be exciting, and we encourage everyone to come along. But mate, I want to get on to you and what's happening with you because obviously there's an elephant in the room, and that's what's happened with the Daily Australian over the last week or so. Nicola Charles has a new ex-husband, an ex-TV husband, and you're the man. So tell us a bit about it. I mean, I don't know how much detail you want to go into it, but at least here's your opportunity to say what you want on that issue.
Well, I've addressed it in part or in full for my Substack followers, and I did put a video out a couple of days ago. Now, I think it's just important to understand what we're all trying to do. So we started the Daily Australian back in early January. We did a couple of interviews together and on another person's show, which was a 24-hour news show for Jim Ferguson back on New Year's Day, which was pretty exciting. We kind of decided at the time that, hey, we're pretty good at this. Maybe we can put together a show. Now, we had worked together at TNT Radio a couple of years prior, and we had a lot of fun doing that, and it just made sense. We thought we'd do a radio show. We thought we would make it exclusive to Substack, given that we were both using that website and really enjoying it. It's kind of like the broadsheet of social media. Anyway, we knew that we weren't the same, and we thought that that might be what would get people interested, in that we come from different perspectives. And this, I think, is what attracted a lot of people to the show, that we were allowed to bring different opinions to the table. We were meant to leave everything outside of our other interests away, and it was just two people at the Daily Oz doing that particular show. Now, it evolved from audio to video when we went from Zoom to StreamYard, which allowed me to control it from my end, the videos and the clips and the crawls and all the other gear, which is kind of cool. And it was a pretty good show, and we did promote it as Australia's best independent news show, and I think it was pretty close when you think of it, based on the reviews that people were giving us. Now, it was getting a lot of, you're doing well when you're getting inquiries from people that don't like you, that either want to put a bit of pressure, etc. And you know that that's kind of where all that stuff's going. So we're being noticed. Anyway, I went off to host, because I host the 51st State, which is another show, and the background is the one that matches what you can see there. Now, I was offered an interview on Australian National Review, and did an interview like all of us when we get invited. We turn up and tell our stories. And at that moment, I was offered the opportunity to host my own show, to appear on Australian National Review, that I had 100% editorial control over, and it was going to be resourced. In other words, I could have the producer of my choice to be able to help me get high quality guests, and et cetera, and that's what it was. So to this day, I still have 100% control. My producer, I also used to work with in my previous life, and he's based in the United States, and we have had some amazing guests on that show, people that I never thought I would be able to speak to, that I've been following myself for years as a fan, such as Lionel Nation. And when I had that interview, I actually showed Lionel, I'm just going to reach forward now, that he was the reason that inspired me. Sorry, as you do this, clumsy things happen, but he inspired me to get in front of a camera, and specifically because he wore these round-shaped glasses. And I found a pair and bought them, and I used to wear them until they broke. And I showed it to him before the show, and he said to me, "That's the nicest thing I've ever heard, that someone is in this business because of me." And I said, "Well, you truly inspired me. And here I am 5 years later talking to you." I got to speak to Jerome Corsi. I got to speak to different people from military. I got to speak to John Eastman, who was the constitutional lawyer, who was the one that Trump went to after 2020, explaining whether or not Pence could certify on January 6th, and he claimed that he didn't need to do it. John Eastman was indicted following that. I interviewed him 2 weeks ago. Now, you cannot pass up an opportunity that creates a forum that here in Australia you can speak to people of that standing around the world. And because of that show, I was also able to interview Darren Hinch about a month ago on the show as well. And the reason was that I was talking to Fred Paul, and the subject of compulsory voting came up. And I cut that clip and put it on my X page, I think, or maybe it was the whole show. And anyway, Darren Hinch commented on that particular video. And I wrote back and I just said, well, thank you for commenting. Would you be available, or would you be interested in an interview? And about a week later, his email address popped up, and I emailed him back and left my phone number. And about an hour later, I got a phone call. I picked up the phone and, "Hi, it's Darren Hinch here." I thought, wow, that's the power of what we're doing. That's pretty cool. So we lined up an interview, and I spoke to Darren for about maybe an hour and a half, and spoke to him about all sorts of things in his life. A man who'd done 60 years as a journalist, been in jail twice and in home detention once for naming child abusers in contempt of court, served 3 years as a senator, which he loved, has taken 7 jabs and still believes in them, despite the fact that, respectfully, I showed him 15 minutes of information that showed him why I have a different viewpoint. And I was totally respectful. And at the end of it, he said, I'm still happy that I took the 7 jabs, but I take your points. And I thought, wow, that tells me everything I need to know about how far we've come in this business, because at the end of it, he included me as one of his peers. He thanked me as a journalist. And I thought that is so mutually respectful. We come from different worlds. I haven't worked in mainstream. I have worked in professional environments in media, but not mainstream. So a different scenario. So anyway, I was asked to host or to stand in as the MC host for the Free Speech Summit at the weekend due to the fact that the presenter that was meant to do it had a personal matter and was unable to do the job. So, of course, I said I would do it. Now, when you're told to MC an event that goes for 21 hours over 2 days, that's a lot of work. That's a lot of pressure. It's a lot of introduction. So anyway, I had to sort of think on the run, but I trusted that I would be able to do it and work on that process. So on the last Friday at the Daily Australian, before I went away, we announced that was what I was doing and that I would deliver a report of that event when I returned on the Tuesday. Unfortunately, on the Sunday afternoon, whilst in the middle of this event in Queensland, I was alerted to the fact that a public announcement had been made and my co-partner had decided to end or cut ties with me and with the show based on an association that didn't suit her. So that's fine if that's what you want to do. I was a little bit taken aback by the approach. I wasn't made aware, but you can't change these things, and that was that. But my immediate concern was not for me. It was actually, Steve, it was for my subscribers. And I don't say that to sound like I'm somebody special, but at the end of the day, people are financially supporting the show. And I felt like I didn't want anyone to feel like that they had been ripped off or shortchanged. So anyway, I thought about it and was, a little bit annoyed, upset, I suppose. But you just have to deal with it. It's like if somebody is taken out in a heart attack or a car accident, you can't change the events. You just got to deal with it. This was the sudden death of the Daily Australian. And so the most important thing for me was as you could argue, an abandoned father with his children, and that was my flock. So my first point was to address the subscribers, to explain to them that my understanding of what was going on, and to offer everyone a refund on subscription, because I thought that was the best way to deal with it, and that's what we did. And anyway, in the process of 48 hours, I'd received numerous phone calls of support and also some different offers of different ideas of where I could contribute in the future. And I'll make some announcements potentially over the weekend, but likely next week over where I'm going, which is kind of exciting. We're not Michael Parkinson in this business. We can't do the same job for 30 years. Things change and things move on, and that's really important. So it was an adventure. We made 136 episodes each day, Monday to Friday. We produced, almost 200 hours of content, which is substantial, significant, and we built up, a fairly significant following. And when you add up all of the different platforms like X, etc., there may have been at some days may have been 50,000 people a day watching the show. I couldn't tell you the exact numbers, but there were significant numbers. And when you think of it, the Today Show only gets 50,000 viewers in the morning across capital cities. I think Sydney, that's what it gets, 50,000 viewers. It's not, that's the difference. That's what's happening so much. It's changing so quickly. So to be in the game, to be in the frame, and to improve on what we were doing each day, to deliver a product that presented different viewpoints and respected different viewpoints, I'm quite proud of that work, and I think that it could certainly be replicated or duplicated in other formats, but it did find its niche, and there are people that wanted to know all about it.
But I guess we're all on a learning experience when we're in this, because we've come into this from the outside world. We've come into media from the outside world. We've come into politics from the outside world, and we're starting to learn what it's all about. And you come into it thinking, I want to build a team. I want to build a good group of people around me. I want to, get a lot of people collectively together and build something. But then you start to realize it's a lot harder than doing it in the real world, because it's so easy to misrepresent someone or to just have a disagreement or a different viewpoint of the direction that you want to go into. And these issues do pop up. I did listen to Nicola Charles's video addressing what had happened, and it didn't seem like she had any ill will towards you, and she actually praised you as being very talented and good at what you do. It's just a situation that's popped up where she feels like she's getting misrepresented in some way, or you're associating with people that she doesn't like. I mean, it's going to happen in this world, and it happens quite frequently. And it seems like sometimes it's better just to go out on your own and do things on your own, because then you can control your own future in the direction that you want to go in.
Well, if you feel that way, then you should. And I've had a fair bit of time to reflect upon that. And most of what work I try and do is in the process of collaboration. And when you think of it, media and politics, they sort of work hand in hand. But in politics, there is no way in the world that everyone in the Labor Party likes Anthony Albanese. There's no way in the world in the Liberal Party everyone likes Susan Lee. And there's no way in the Liberal Party that everyone liked Peter Dutton. It's obvious that they didn't. And that's where factions come from. And some will say it's an ideology, that you have the left faction and the right faction, etc. But it's also because there are different ideologies within. So what the factions process is a recognition that the entity is bigger than the idea. And that's something that we struggle with, because in the freedom movement, or the third party movement, as I prefer to call it, we have what we call idealists, and that is people that believe that it can only be a certain way, at a certain standard, in a certain process. And if you step outside of that, you have created a breach or a failure, an imperfection. And the problem is, in politics, is idealism can only ever achieve 10% success. It can't get any more than that. That's just how you operate on the fringes. And the result is that the majority are in the middle, the 80% fill the center. And then they stretch to the sides. So if you're going to go for political power, you can't be an idealist. You've got to be a 51-49 or a centrist, because all politics is decided at the end of the day 51-49, give or take. And so that lies the problem. So what I've sort of deduced within the third party movement is we have our own factions that are either recognized, but they're not. They're invisible, but they exist. And my point is that there are idealists within the third party movement, and idealists focus on process more than anything else. So a perfect example is that my partner didn't like the fact that I was working for someone who she thought had a black mark against their name. Now, that's fine if you want to recognize that. But see, for me, I don't see it that way. And the reason is that I'm a pragmatist. And a pragmatist is someone that has to get the job done. Now, I also don't think and don't believe that you can censor free speech. For goodness sake, we have been fighting free speech in this country for 5 years. All of us have been censored for things that are now turning out to be known to be true. Where's the apology from those that took us out? Where's the compensation? And where's their punishment? Where are they being held to account for restricting that? So there's no way in the world that I will ever say that any form of censorship is acceptable. And at the Free Speech Summit, I said that there are things here that you're going to agree with and things that you won't. And things might get ugly. And if they do get ugly, well, that's the price of free speech. But I'm not going to stop it. Now, I had people reach out to me before and say, don't go. You've got to stand down. You can't say this. You've got to do that. I'm thinking, well, who the hell are you to tell me that I can't speak or that I can't let someone else speak? You don't have to believe what people say. You don't have to do what people say, but you have to allow them the facility and the and the platform to be able to speak. And that is the entire point. So as a pragmatist, it's kind of different because if you're going to talk about someone and say that that person can't speak, but if they have the resources to put something together to allow others to speak, isn't that a good thing? And I thought the idea of if you did something wrong, you're meant to be rehabilitated. And if you're rehabilitated, you become a good member of society again. So this is this weird judgment call, etc. Now, regardless of all of that, when you think about the politics, right, every single one of us in the third party movement today is here because somewhere along the line, the establishment has created something that has formed a breach of trust within us. Now, it may have been some form of medical damage, It may have been that something else happened that in our lives and the politicians let us down when we made a particular approach. But all of us have got some form of PTSD that is the reason why we no longer believe and trust government at face value. And we believe that whilst they don't lie about everything, when they get caught out once, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. And that's the whole point. And so at the summit, there was an approach from SBS. They'd received permission that they could come in and film some free speech documentary. But I was approached by the presenter of the show, John Safran, and he asked for an interview. But he caught me in between tasks, and I was racing to the bathroom and coming back, and I had 3 other things to do. And I said, "Oh yeah, look, I'll think about it. We'll talk about it later." And then I realized what was going on here, and he wasn't particularly friendly. It didn't really matter, but it was just and I just, you know how you smell a rat in these things, and I knew that there'd be some sort of hit piece thing going on. And I thought, well, the only way to find out is to challenge. So I was up on stage and I was introducing John Larter, who, for all intents and purposes, if you wanted to pick somebody in our movement that could serve within a year or two as the acting prime minister of our country from the third party, I reckon John Larter would be my top 3 nominees. I mean, the man's got everything. He's as Australian as they come. He's a qualified 30-year paramedic. He's the president of the Aligned Council. He was the deputy mayor in the Snowy, and he's currently a sitting councillor. And if you want something done, ask a busy person. And of course, he's the co-host of Club Grubbery. And when you ring him up, he answers the phone. Like, that's John Larter. If I could nominate anyone in that position in the first instance to be our first leader, purely out of the movement, unqualified, he's the guy I'd go with. So I'm introducing John, and I asked the audience to raise their hands if anyone had been affected by the experimental medicine. I got a 100% rise in hands. And everyone had something happen to them or someone that they loved. And I then explained to them that all of us have PTSD. And the thing is, we don't look to the government to blame them from the point of view that we want compensation, we want to hold our hand out, and we want you to look after us. On the contrary, we don't want you to look after us. We just want you to be held to account for the dishonesty that you did and the damage that you caused. And that means that we're not victims. And rather, what we are survivors. And in actual fact, this pragmatist here believes that it's not just about survival, it's about thriving, because in adversity comes growth, weakness becomes strength. And I believe that this is the great moment in history for all of us here in Australia and around the world to turn this great big ship around as massive secrets are being revealed. The breach of trust will permeate across the planet. And we need to know where we're going next, because if and when it all collapses, who leads us out? And do we just sit there and looking like deer in the headlights? Well, what now? And that's my problem with the idealists, is that the idealists, great. I'm so glad that you have principles that are above mine, but it's politics, and politics is a blood sport, and it's 51-49. So somewhere between media and somewhere between politics, we got to come together in what is it is a genuine fight. And we only have a handful of politicians in the parliament, most of whom are from One Nation. And I tell you what, if Pauline Hanson is the most powerful third-party politician in Australia, how many people underneath who are not elected in this movement are more qualified, more accomplished, better spoken, more research, whatever? No disrespect to Pauline, but behind her, there are literally hundreds, if not thousands, of very capable people that haven't been able to get into that great big house in Canberra to make their contribution. And so you've got to start laying the groundwork there and realizing that instead of working against each other, obviously we want to work with each other, but we're still separated by the factions of idealism versus pragmatism. And I haven't even talked about the extremism component and the ego. And that's the other big thing. And because when you get elected to office and you have that you finally got your claws, your fingernails in, you are not letting go if you're on a mission, whatever that is. And sometimes the power is worth more than the purpose of what you went to go in the first place. You figure, I'm better off being in here and fighting another day, even if I have to make compromises along the way. And therefore, even at that level, the idealism goes out the window. So I hope that Steve explains a little bit more sort of layering of what we're up against here, and realizing that when you work out what you want to do, when you work out where you're going, and if you want outcomes, the fight to get to the outcome is worth more than the process along the way. But I respect others that want to play it differently, and that's where our differences lie.
I think you're exactly right about the trauma side of things, because COVID was such a traumatic time for people that lost their jobs or lost family members or had their livelihoods threatened by government. But for a lot of people, it was just a holiday. It was the best time of their lives because they got to stay at home and they got paid for it, and they got to go to the beach every day. So I think that's where the divide is, at least with the broader Australian community. But there are, as you know, divides in politics, and that's a big part of the problem. I mean, the political parties definitely have a role to play, but the way that they're structured and the way they operate is tremendously a tremendous problem for this country in the way that our government operates. And as you said, a lot of the time that comes down to people getting into parliament. They may have good intentions going in, but once they're in there, they want to hold on to their spot. And it becomes more about that and playing the political game more than anything. And I think a good example of that is some of the Nationals. I've spoken to a lot of the Nationals members of Parliament behind the scenes, and they're like us. They think like us. They're concerned about the same sorts of issues. I interviewed a National Party lower house member, and I watched his maiden speech. And if you watch his maiden speech, he's talking about the Reserve Bank and the fiat currency system and all that sort of thing. And when I spoke to him behind the scenes, I said, "You haven't mentioned that since," and he said, "Yeah, and I won't." Because he's now in the system, he's playing that game. So one of the unique things about you is, and I guess talking to me as well, when you had me on the Daily Australian, we talked about me being in the Liberal Party and what I experienced there, and also being in One Nation. You were in the UAP, so you have that experience of the minor parties, but you also told me that you were in the Labor Party as well, which I find very, very interesting, because I'd like to share some notes with you about your experience in the Labor Party. Tell us, how long were you in there, and what were your experiences within the Labor Party? How did you find it? And did you find a lot of people within the Labor Party that do think along the same lines as we do, but they've just kept down and they can't speak out?
Well, it's probably worth just doing a very quick sort of chronological order. My first real taste of it was December of 1982, and my dad picks me up from school with the afternoon newspapers in Sydney, the Sun and the Mirror, which he always picked up to look at the form guide, etc. But he was always very savvy on the news. He pointed to the front page and he said, "Look at this. Malcolm Fraser's just called an election, and the Labor Party is going to switch to Bob Hawke as its leader." I said, "Dad, what does that even mean?" He said, "You watch, Bob Hawke's going to win and he's going to become the Prime Minister." Now, Malcolm Fraser was Prime Minister for 8 years, so I'm 10, and that's all I'd ever known, obviously, in my life. I didn't even know you had changed Prime Ministers. So when in March of 83, I woke up and went downstairs in our house in Davidson on the North Shore of Sydney, and my mother showed me the Sunday papers and she said, "Look at this, Robert James Lee Hawke has become the Prime Minister." And she had this great big smile on her face. And there was this great feeling of renewal and hope in Australia. And we lived in a conservative seat in the North Shore of Sydney. So there weren't a whole lot of Labor supporters there. So the reality was that it was something that was fresh, and that's what happened. So I thought my father was an oracle. And at that point on, I just followed on what was going on. I was in year 6, getting ready to go to high school. And by the time I got into high school, sort of year 8, year 9, we're talking about, commerce and economics, etc. And I'm studying the J curve of Paul Keating by 1986. And so I am hooked at this point and realizing what's going on. And Keating's explaining how things are going to work. The economy was very slow and lagging, and it wasn't going in the right directions. By the time I got to the end of high school, interest rates were 17, 18%, and people were calling for the head of Keating. But he remains in power and becomes Prime Minister in 1991 whilst I'm at university. So all I know for 13 years is Labor, and they are going through the ups and downs, but clearly they're outplaying the Liberals. Paul Keating becomes Prime Minister, and I think it was 1990, before he actually did. I remember going down to the suburb of Maroubra after a day at university and volunteering to help out, hand out for the Labor Party. And I walked into this big old video shop that was as big as a supermarket, and there were 5 old blokes sitting at a table at the front. They all had silver hair, and they were sitting kind of like a pyramid, the tall guy in the middle, and they were shorter on each side. And I walked up to the bloke in the middle, big, tough, union-looking bloke, and I told him I wanted to become more to help out. And he said, "Are you a member of a union?" And I said, "No." Not thinking, of course, I was a member of the student union. And he said, "Well, come back when you are." And I thought, why do I have to be a member of a union to volunteer to help out? So I walked away and didn't have much more to do with it. And it wouldn't be until 14 years later, Mark Latham was the leader of the Labor Party, and he recruits Peter Garrett to be to run for Kingsford Smith and become the member there, and then go on to be the arts minister, environment minister, etc. And that's when I thought that I'm a Midnight Oil fan. I'm a big lefty. If I don't join the Labor Party now, I'm never going to do it. So I did, and went to the branches, etc. Now, I remained a member for about 4 years. I got invited to state conferences. I became the junior vice president. I wrote 2 separate I can't remember the name of the term of it, but 2 separate things that ended up becoming policy that, would you believe it, one of them got to John Howard somehow through the Labor Party, and he adopted. And what it was tax-free interest on savings for first home buyers. They actually made that a policy. And that was something that emanated from the Quakers Hill branch as a motion. That's where I was going. It starts off as a motion and passes through. So when I got to the state conference, I got elected as a delegate in 2007. I think it was, maybe it was 2006, as a delegate to the state conference from the Quakers Hill branch, etc. So I go along and you get to vote on what will be Labor Party policy in the state for the next 12 months. So I'm pretty excited. This is the democratic process. I'm one of the delegates. I'm going to meet all these, interesting, fascinating people. All the big politicians will be there. I'll get to speak to all these people. Now, when we get there, I arrive at Darling Harbour, and we're given some sort of thick book, and I open it up, and it's got on each page is a motion to be voted upon. And at the bottom of each page, it said, "You will vote yes for this, or you will vote no for that." Like there was only 2 choices, and it told you how you had to vote. And I thought, what? Is this an error? Am I looking at the wrong page, or how does this work? And sure enough, the first one comes up and everyone voted yes. And the next one, everyone voted no. And I thought, how is this predetermined? So by the time I got to the third one, I thought, oh, this is bullshit. And I just got up and thought, well, I don't need to be here. This is boring as hell. And we're watching these people literally happy clap their way into being sheep. So I went outside.
It's like a Communist Party meeting.
Yes, 100%. This was my first feeling, right? I thought, well, this isn't what I expected. Anyway, I wandered off outside, and who should be holding court with people coming and going was none other than Bob Ellis, who I was a big fan of Bob's writing, and he was a filmmaker. He'd written a book called 101 Arguments Against Economic Rationalism, which I'd read and thought was brilliant, and he'd done many other things. And there he was with his glasses hanging around his chest here with string, and he had bit of food on his jacket, and I thought, perfect, Bob Ellis. I went and introduced myself as Jason from Greenway, started talking to him, and a couple of hours later, we're still chatting away, comparing notes, and he said to me, he looked at his watch as people were coming out of the theatre, and he said, "What time's lunch?" I said, "Well, based on all these people leaving, I'd say it's now." And he said, "Come on then, let's go get a steak sandwich." So I went down to a restaurant with Bob Ellis at a state conference. We had a steak sandwich and a bottle of wine, and he told me some stuff that literally blew my mind. That was my half-day apprenticeship with someone who had written speeches for Kevin Rudd, for Gough Whitlam, for Bob Hawke, for Paul Keating, for Kim Beazley, and others. And I got to ask him some questions that blew my mind. I asked him, out of everyone you know, I said, who is the smartest person? And he said, "Oh, don't you know?" I said, "Well, that's why I'm asking you." He said, "Kim Beazley." I go, "Really?" Beazley? He said, "Yeah." And I said, "Why is that?" He said, "Because you can put Kim Beazley in a room and he will talk about any subject for hours. Can talk about anything." And I said, "What about Gough Whitlam?" And he goes, Gough, he says, he comes in a blaze of glory. You walk out for an hour and you come back for the closing remarks. And I'm like, wow, that was his description of Gough Whitlam. And then he said to me something. He said,
just sorry to cut you off. If you read Mark Latham's diaries, he paints the opposite view of Beazley. And obviously they were rivals within the party, but he tries to make out that Beazley wasn't smart at all and was a complete dunce. But I guess that's Mark Latham for you.
But doesn't that tell you then that people don't agree within the political party system, right? And there lies my point, that you can be on extreme. So Latham, a former leader of the party, almost prime minister in 2004, if it wasn't for that crazy 2GB handshake that probably dropped him 5 points. And then Bob Ellis, who's written speeches for everyone. Now, Bob Ellis then said to me, he said, I've got the solution for corporate monopolies. I go, what are you talking about? He said, well, what's the end result of competition? And I look like a stunned mullet. And he said, one winner. He said, the way that I would fix corporations in Australia is I would limit them all to 4 outlets. I'm like, wow, like that's a big statement. So this is something that you're thinking about, that is obviously an idea that you want to get out there, and you're telling this guy sitting in front of you and you're sharing these ideas. That's why it was such a big deal. Anyway, fast forward a dozen years, not that many years, but Bob Ellis passed away and some horrific headlines came out about his associations with underage girls, and it just shattered the image. But I make this point. Should I be cancelled because I had lunch with Bob Ellis, or should I put that down to experience that this is what happens in the great big wide world of politics and absolute power? So I just parked that there for a moment. But it was in 2008 that I was in a branch meeting, and a state MP walked in regularly to the meetings. He came straight up to me. They tended to like me amongst all the other people, and they'd always come and say hello, shake my hand and have a chat. And I was told that the ALP was planning to dump Nathan Rees as Premier and replace her with Christina Keneally, to which I was disgusted. Because Nathan was only 41 or 42, and he'd been put in there by default error, because the man that was supposed to take his role also got white-handed, which was John Della Bosca, was meant to become the Premier, but there was two scandals that forced him out. So Nathan from the left was pushed in. Well, the left, the power brokers had enough of the lefties in there, and they were going to replace with Christina Keneally, who I didn't like. I didn't respect from the point of view that she just wasn't intelligent enough, and I'd seen her behaviour at the state conference and thought, no way in the world are you going to replace Nathan with Christina. So I put my hands up and I said that this, plain and simple, is a play from Eddie Obeid. I said, Eddie Obeid's going to go to jail for corruption, and I'm out of here. I turned around, picked up my backpack, and I was gone. Now, they all mocked me. And of course, Eddie went to jail. Christina Keneally was made Premier and lost in the biggest defeat ever from the Labor Party in New South Wales. So I tell you what, standing up for my principles in that situation paid dividends and never went back. But my branch president used to say to me, because I'd often get frustrated, and he'd say, don't leave the party, fight from within, don't fight from without. Right? That old chestnut. The problem is, what you do is you're in a hierarchy, and you get smothered because someone above you who's got a little bit more ranking or power can overcome you. So in 2007, I stood for the seat of Greenway in pre-selection. There was 4 of us. And I had built a very good website called mygreenway.com.au. It's no longer around. It's been closed for many years. And it was getting 5,000 hits a day for all of its great resources. I had heaps of speeches and videos and all sorts of great political resources, current news. It was a great political site dedicated to my little electorate. And school teachers were using it as a resort. And I could tell because all the EDU websites were coming through as people linking onto it. They're coming to me for this information for their classroom. I thought, wow, this is a great resource. So I offered to build one for another state MP to help him with his campaign, to which he was grateful for. Now, he never got permission to do it. He just built it, and it was legit, and it was just a legitimate website. So when I ran for pre-selection, I got a phone call from one day from somebody very high up now in the New South Wales government, and they rang me and said, take your website down. And I said, excuse me, who am I speaking to? Take your website down. And then it took 3 goes before someone told me their name at the other end of the phone, and told me that it was not policy that I could have a website. I'm going, have you seen the website? It's got nothing to do with anything that's going to put you at risk. It's a community service. Nope, you can't have one. And that was it. And what I found out was that one of my competitors for pre-selection had dobbed me in because it was way that he could take away my advantage, because everyone knew that My Greenway was the best website around, and that was it. And I thought, there you go, politics is a blood sport. Your own mates will white ant you. And
this is exactly what I found in the Liberal Party as well. They don't even focus on their political opposition, whether it be the Labor Party or the Greens or even the minor right parties. They're so focused on themselves because all of this stuff is going on in the background, and all the leaks that come out against different politicians are often they're coming from their own side.
Yes. Well, I was told that on multiple occasions of the exact plots to take out certain people, and they were described to me in great detail. And I said, how do you know this? And they said, well, it was our faction. And I'm like, you are kidding me. That's how dirty politics is.
Graham Richardson wrote probably the best political book that I've ever written, called Whatever It Takes. And the whole book's about that. The whole book is about taking down, he took down Bill Hayden, and eventually he took down Bob Hawke as well and installed Paul Keating. I mean, that was his bread and butter, basically taking down his former allies and installing someone new. So, I mean, this is how it all operates behind the scenes. But I guess we've established, I think everyone instinctively knows that, at least whether they've experienced it for themselves or not. But how do we adapt to that? I mean, obviously there's a lot of people out there that feel like Australia is going in the wrong direction. We've gotten to the point where we can't rely on these politicians and political parties anymore, but we still need to be able to work within that system. I think independent media is going to play a huge role, but I think groups like Australians for Better Government and other different lobby groups and think tanks will also play a role, because at the end of the day, politics is downstream from culture. And if you can put pressure externally on these politicians, we may be able to shift them in a different direction. Because as you said, it's a numbers game. It's a 51-49 game. And if they think they're going to lose their spot because we can generate enough public support outside to be able to influence them externally, I mean, I think that's one way of doing it. I know that there's other people out there, and I was one of them that was thinking that you could reform it from within. I think the only way to do that is if you're mobilized and you have a plan. I think if you have people going in one by one, they're just going to get picked off too easily. There has to be a real plan of getting a whole bunch of people together, and then again you're dealing with personalities and conflicts and egos, and that's just going to come apart. So with all that said, what's your views on all of that? How do you think that we move forward trying to get Australia back on track based on your experience and how you see the game right now?
Well, I think there are two strategies that neither of them have come to any form of maturity, and I think that these two strategies may well be the catalyst to achieve both goals. So, because we're so fractured and split on the third-party basis, so one nation holds the power within the third-party movement, but one nation excludes a lot of people from joining for various different reasons. Not saying that you can't join, but people have joined and they've left, so they'll never go back. Now, the libertarians are all about freedoms, so they are happy to sell your infrastructure to China or to Iran. And then you've got the other component, let's say the people first, the Jared Rennicks, who believe that you need an element of protection, that's not acceptable. So just looking at that basis there, and then you've got other parties. You've got the Citizens Party, and you've got Robbie Barwick there, and the fabulous work that he's done with the banking, and yet that will get people offside at the Libertarians. Now, if a Libertarian says to you, you need to not say something, well, then Libertarians disqualify. That's an interesting story in itself. So they can't censor, so at least they're for free speech. And you've got, you've got other parties. You've also got the Gap Party. Now, this is an interesting line in the sand. So I took some notes the other day because I was putting something together. And I think it's interesting when you look at, so you divide politics. You've got Labor and Liberal, which technically is corrupt, but pretends it's not. And then they point to the third parties, which isn't corrupt, but they tell you that it is, or it's unqualified, or it's uncredentialed. And therefore we're the great unwashed and we can't be looked at. So we're mocked and ridiculed and put into a corner and shut up. So within the third party movement, you've got the sovereign citizen movement, right? So these are the people that believe that things go back to a fault in the Constitution, resulting perhaps from the Australia Act which was behaving as a constitutional override that wasn't achieved by referendum. So therefore, it should be wound back. And I understand that argument. However, there are very, very good politicians such as Gerard Rennick that may not argue that or don't think that that's where the energy lies. So you've got a split there. So how do you bring the Rennicks and the Cullitons to the table, and how do you put them together? And why doesn't Rod want to talk to these people? Why is he still staying on the fringes and playing it as an idealist? So what I'm trying to say is that whilst all this stuff's going on in the background, we can't get very far. But what we can do is we can create political power without actually having any by not creating another political party, but creating something completely different behind the scenes, which is through the process of organizing. So if we could organize all of our movement together and say to this movement, if there's 500,000 of us, what could we achieve if we all contributed $100 for 500,000 people? We'd have, what, $50 million in the bank. What could we achieve with $50 million? Well, one thing we could do is we could have a very powerful legal fund. One thing we could do is that we could technically, $50 million a year, we could run a primaries, a candidate like John Ruddock suggested, and pick the best third-party candidate in each electorate in Australia and technically fund that one candidate. Give them a check for $50,000 as a contribution and say, go and run with that, because now you've got resources. Maybe we've got $70,000, they get $70,000. Maybe you pull part of that money and run a TV campaign. So instead of having 12 different candidates in each electorate, we can cut it down to, say, 4 or 5. And then this one candidate from, if it's One Nation or People First or Libertarians or whoever else it is, the Heart Party or the Citizens, whatever's running, then that's the best candidate for the job. And that means that you are picking the best candidates. So that process technically is like unionizing. So one of the things that the independent media needs is it needs to be credentialed. It needs press passes. It needs to be on a level playing field with the mainstream journalists so that we cannot be excluded when eSafety Karen decides that we don't qualify, because credentialism is what they are using when the narrative is being checked. Now, park that there for a moment. If you just a very brief outline, because I haven't even talked about how you can use the law and the doctors and all these organizations that can organize as well. What about when the next mandate comes, if and when it comes, what would we do next time? Would we scream at the clouds and protest, or would we have 500,000 people as union contributors, and suddenly we go back to a union, let's say, to the law firm and say, can you handle this? And 500,000 people can go on strike, and 500,000 people can do all the normal things that you used to be able to do because we're organized. That is just one idea. Now, that's obviously showing you my Labor blood coming through, because that whole party is built on ACTU and the different kinds of unions. Now, I don't advocate for that, and I'm not talking about a union that tells your boss you got to pay more money. I'm talking about something that represents your rights and freedoms, that can give you power before you have any, because you can't ring up Pauline or Malcolm and say, hey, we've been mandated lockdown again. Can you go tell Albo to pull his thugs off? Well, they can't do anything, but you can through another method, and that's what I'm saying. So that's step one. However, that's not going to get 51% of Australia on side, but what it will do is get us 5%, 7%, 10%, whatever we are. That's going to protect us in the interim. What I did when I set up the 51st state was start a conversation about the concept of Australia becoming, by definition, the 51st state. Not because I'm advocating that we do that and that there's a pathway to do it, but what I wanted to explain was that the King of Australia, well, the King of England, King Charles, he attends World Economic Forum meetings. He's a globalist. We're part of the AUKUS agreement, which is Australia, UK, and US building nuclear submarines, of which we're expected to park ours off the coast of China to keep an eye on our biggest trading partner. The question is, how can we be a servant to three masters? That doesn't make any sense to me, and it's not possible that we can do that. And I feel that that's why Albanese's all at sea, because he's trying to get a meeting with Trump. He's doing his best to go to China and to shore up business. He's telling Darwin Port we want it back from the Chinese. And he doesn't know if he's Arthur or Martha around AUKUS. So that's why he doesn't know what's going on. And most of us will think that that's basically because he's incompetent. But he's kind of been snookered. Now, I asked Craig Kelly maybe 6 months ago, maybe a little bit longer. I said, Craig, why do we in the third party conservative movement allow the globalists to run the Republican movement? The lefties. It was Peter Fitzsimons, and now it's Craig Foster, the soccer player and commentator. And he said, well, it's simply because we haven't come up with a better model. And I said, that's no excuse. And he agreed with me. It's not. But why would you be a monarchist and a conservative, but a nationalist if the king is a globalist? In other words, everything at that point is controlled opposition, for want of that ridiculous term that everyone uses when they don't like you. You're controlled opposition. But in actual fact, if we're not talking about becoming a republic because simply we think we are protected by our constitution that is not actually working for us because of the Australia Act that the Labor Party put in, why are we allowing the Labor Party to run the Republican movement? That in itself is controlled opposition. So my argument is this, that if we were to be able to come up with a new way to talk about the Republic again, and it's been 26 years already, and we could put a new person at the front that could talk about it, and we could come up with an interesting model that we could debate, all of a sudden, the sovereign citizen thing just goes straight into the Republican movement. The libertarians, when they realize that they don't want to be globalists and nationalists, they come to the Republican movement. The people first people come to the Republican movement. Like the One Nations are all coming to the Republican movement because I'll tell you why it's so crucial. But for those that are saying, "Oh, hang on, Jason, we're monarchists and it's a better system," whatever. I interviewed Dr. Gavin Ashenden on TNT about a year and a bit ago. He was the chaplain to Queen Elizabeth, and we started this conversation. And I asked him about the UK, and he said the Islamification of the UK is the greatest problem that we face today. And I'm not telling you that I'm telling you that it's real, because my friends, and I know many, many powerful people, have told me that this was the model, was to take over Europe through the Islamification. At the same time, the globalists, through the World Economic Forum, all those agencies, the UN, etc., have the same business model. And so do the cultural Marxists, the young kids at university today that believe that they lean on the government, even though the government got him into this mess, but the government's going to get me out of this mess. And you guys are controlled when you believe that. So therefore, those three parties are working together to achieve the end goal, which is one world government, which we all know that whole story. And that's what the US collapse through Biden and Obama was all about, was to collapse the United States and to deliver them as the last entity, the big one. And that creates the one world government. Well, thank God Trump's there to stop that, and it won't happen. But they're still trying in case they can take Trump out at the knees, and they're still going to go with it, but it's not going to happen. That's what this whole flip is all about. Putting that together, Steve, this is why I think it's so fascinating, because at long last, if we can get behind something that sits above all of the bullshit that we've been fighting about, then we start bringing in the other people that also believe that maybe it's time, because you don't have to be a monarchist or a Republican as such, or a lefty or a righty at a basic level, until you see something that you go, oh man, I want to be an Australian again, and a republic is the perfect way to be able to do it. Now, let's look at our Indigenous community. Aren't they the ones telling us that it's the Crown that took their land? Wouldn't all of the Indigenous people want to become a republic? Now, before you guys all get funny and say, but the United Nations and the Voices are going to steal all this stuff, we're beyond that. We are separate. Now, the US is already pulling out of UNESCO. They will pull out of the United Nations. So thinking it from a 51st state point of view, no tariffs, free visas, pulling out of the WHO, pulling out of the United Nations, we could already be there as a de facto 51st state. So we become a republic, and we use the idea of what they're using through that the US Constitution, not copying it, but we sit under the umbrella to protect ourselves. So what I'm saying, it's almost like a parking station while we sort our stuff out. But these are big conversations, that big ideas that can be shared, that create the protection through organization and a pathway to get out of this mess that we can't unravel 500 different things. We go with one. We simplify it. Let's get the third party movement to work together to take over the Republican movement, because it's only Craig Foster and they don't do a very good job. And then we bring in our National Party friends who are working with the Liberals. And I believe in the future, it should be a coalition of third party and national that runs the government of this country, because where third party can't do it on its own, we're going to have to merge with someone. But that's how you do it. And those nationals, there are some pretty good guys there. And Michael McCormack today, did deliver a scathing report on the green energy fiasco affecting his people in the Riverina. They've had enough. We know that Matt Canavan is 100% on our side. I think Jacinta Price, what she did for the Voice, she would easily come back into the Nationals. And I just think, imagine Jacinta Price being a Nationals third party, that new coalition, and she was the foreign minister going out there and banging heads around the world for the Australia that she wants. I am the political romantic, Steve. I've been around enough people to know that it's possible. Paul Keating taught us that you have to be a maddie in politics. You can't just be run of the mill. You have to be a bit crazy and a bit wild, and they're the only people that get things done. So they're my things that I throw into the pie, because you guys are the Australians for Better Government. And I know you, and I know Kevin Lockray, and I'll tell you what, the Brains Trust is above and beyond, and it just makes sense to me that this is something that could be discussed, something that could get people on board. And even if it doesn't go anywhere, it's one of those things that makes you feel good. It makes you want to turn up.
And we're hoping to appeal to everyone across the political spectrum. It doesn't matter what party you're in. You mentioned all the minor parties. We want to be able to appeal to Labor Party people and Liberal Party people, and even potentially some Greens people. And we think that we can do that because it's all about bettering the country collectively. It's not about supporting a particular political party or anything like that. So that's where the strength of Australians for Better Government is, from our perspective at least. But you talked about Australia becoming a republic. I'd love for you to have a chat to Kevin Lockray, whether it be on this show or maybe potentially on your show, because I had a conversation with him on the weekend, and he says, Stephen, we're already a republic. The Prime Minister is running the executive branch of government. So there is no influence from the UK. Obviously, the Crown does still sit there, but it does nothing. I mean, the Governor General is just a symbolic figure at this point. It's selected by the government. It's advised by the government. And that's what Australians for Better Government say. We should be electing our Governor General to run the executive branch of government. And I think that is a step to a republic. I disagree with Craig Kelly where he says we haven't come up with a better system yet. I think the system is already there in the Constitution, where you have the Governor General, and you can call it a president if you want. It's basically the same role. They're meant to run the executive branch of government. It's only through the Westminster conventions that you get this thing where the Prime Minister comes in and selects, and the government comes in and selects the Governor General and then advises the Governor General. The Prime Minister is not mentioned in Chapter 2 of the Constitution. The Prime Minister is not meant to have a role in the executive branch, but it only does through these Westminster conventions, which the Australian people have never had an opportunity to have a say on. We've never been asked, do we support these conventions? Do we agree that the Prime Minister should be selecting the Governor General and then advising the Governor General? So that's a whole big topic and a discussion for another podcast, because I'd love to hear that battle of ideas between you and Kevin. I think you guys could probably come to a lot of common ground on that as well. So maybe we can tee that up at some point in the future. But I know we're getting towards the end now. I do want to discuss quickly independent media as well, because obviously we started on that a little bit at the start with what you were trying to achieve with the Daily Australian, and also with your podcast, The 51st State. We look to America in a lot of ways, and we see independent media over there. Obviously, they were very, very influential during the last presidential election, and a lot of people say that was a big reason why Trump got elected. It hasn't quite kicked off here in Australia, and I think our population has a role to play there. Also, American podcasters appeal to a worldwide audience, so that inflates their numbers as well. But there are a lot of good people around like yourself. I mean, I could list a whole bunch of very talented people that, for whatever reason, they just don't seem to get traction. The pieces of the puzzle are there. Is there anything that the independent media can do here in Australia to, I guess, get onto the same pedestal that we've seen in America?
Well, you're right when you say that the numbers and the volume is very different, plus the fact that we are heavily censored and shadow banned, and so that when you lose that traction and you close down, when you lose 25,000 followers, you can't just open up a week later and they come back. They don't. you've lost them. So you've got to rebuild it. It's the strangest thing. And the other thing is you must have momentum. You must be consistent. And to be able to have momentum, consistent, and a platform, you need to have this as your profession, which means that you need to be professional. And that means you need to be paid for your work. Now, we have a tall poppy syndrome in this country, and there are people that insist that they shouldn't have to pay for independent media because otherwise you're a shill. They use this term to beat you up. And I'm like, well, do I come to your work and hassle you and say that you have to work for free while you go and fix my car or whatever it is? It's a nonsense argument. It's just that we haven't been used to a business model that provides for this. So first of all, we must become professional. We must get credentialed. We must get press passes. We must get a code of conduct, and we must organize. And therefore, when you do all of those things, you are going to be recognized. You're going to have, periodic meetings where the media gets together. You also get invited to attend press conferences, etc. And you then rub shoulders with the mainstream. And before you know it, we're not separate. We're all part of the same thing. So like anything, it's determination and it's quality of product, but consistency and momentum are the most important things in what we do. And by that, I mean, if you say you're going to do something, you do it. If you plan to do something, you do it. You have to keep delivering. And it is a big monster. You've got to keep delivering product that needs to be consumed. And then you've got to realize, well, does it all need to be serious? And are we too serious? When you think that Joe Rogan's the biggest news podcaster in the world, he's not serious. He sits there and he smokes cigars and he swears and he talks garbage and it works.
Mate, look at Friendly Geordies here in Australia. I mean, he's very political, but he's not serious at all. He's the complete opposite to that.
Again, and so trying to capture that audience, and you wonder where that audience is and how much capacity they've got for consumption. And each of us arrived in this business not because we applied for a job and got offered a job. You arrive at it because it's a calling. You feel like that there's a niche that's missing, that you know enough about that to share that information, and you put your mug out there to get knocked off, and often you have a little bit of success that encourages you to keep going. And so that's the other side of this, that it's not for many of us. We do it because it becomes an obsession. But if you find that and you make it your profession, you'll never work a day in your life. And isn't that what we've all wanted to do, is to find something in our lives that we really love and believe in, and make that our life's work. And when you do that, you then realize that I don't need to retire anymore. I can do this until I drop. And that's another thing that changes. So then you start looking at the way that you live your life. You start realizing that you've escaped when you can do this. You've escaped the rat race one way or another because you're running your own race. And you then think about what you want to do next, and you realize that you can save a bit of money here. You can do that over there a little bit different. And suddenly you are in control of your life. To escape the rat race, which COVID gave us a hint for, but a lot of people were desperate to get back, was probably the key in all of it. But look, the capacity of people to consume the information that we share still blows my mind. How much involvement there really is. But I know that my numbers were 100 times higher during COVID. I could pump out a 30-minute statistics video that would get 55,000, 80,000 views every day, and I just think, oh, well, this is easy. This business, they're massive. But of course, everyone was at home then, and then you come back to reality, and a 10,000 video, you almost want to give yourself an Academy Award. But of course, it changes, and you'd never know where your next hit video is coming from. Sometimes you publish something you think's garbage. You wake up the next day, 250,000 views. You produce the next 5 things that you think should win Pulitzer Prizes, and you can't get 500 views between all 5 of them, and you can't work it out. So it is a tricky business, and therefore it just demonstrates that the reality of you just got to work and work and work, and the harder I work, honestly, Steve, the luckier I get.
And I do think we're all in our infancy in this space. I mean, I think anything politically is a long game. And if you look at people like Anthony Albanese, spent 30 years in Parliament because before he became Prime Minister. I mean, I was in year 6 when he got elected. I mean, it goes that far back. John Howard, same thing. Paul Keating was in Parliament for a very long time. These people have gone through that long game and that struggle, and that they've been determined to get to where they need to go. Where when you look at our movement, and what we're trying to achieve here in this country. We've basically started from, maybe some started in 2020, a lot of us started 2021, 2022. It's not a lot of time in the whole scheme of things, and I think sometimes we really have to step back and look at the overall picture of what we've all achieved in that time. I mean, we were only talking before the show started about the graphics that we're now producing, a lot of the production stuff that we do behind the scenes. When you compare that to when we first started, it's completely evolved over time. So we've got to this point. Where do we go from here? And it reminds me of I was listening to Rob Herzog last night. He is a billionaire in South Africa who's trying to reform South Africa, or at least put his views forward on where he thinks South Africa is going. He's been doing a lot of podcasts internationally and trying to get his message out there. One of the things he said was that short to medium term, he's got very, I guess, dark prospects for South Africa. He doesn't see that the country is going in the right way. But long term, he's very optimistic. And when I heard him say that, I felt the same about here in Australia. I think short to medium term, we've got a lot of issues coming up. There's a lot of fires that we have to put out. Obviously, we don't have a government that we feel is heading Australia in the right direction. But long term, I am optimistic. I think this is a great country with plenty of potential and a lot of good people that are hardworking and they're real leaders. How do you feel about that? What are your views of Australia, where we're heading, and are you as optimistic long term as I am?
A very disturbing statistic popped up this week that said that half the country is now dependent on government.
Yeah.
So that's a scary stat. So whilst we're in a situation that half of the population believes that the government is the answer, unfortunately, that's probably the tipping point where you won't be able to convince enough of them to say, well, we have to change things in that sense. So in other words, we really do need a change of government, at least from the perspective that the Labor Party has voted out. Now, whether that will be through double dissolution, I don't think so, because you're not going to give up a 91-seat majority. So I feel like we've got to sit another 3 years, at least to 28, before things may turn around. I don't expect Susan Lee to be the leader at the next election. I think it'll be very similar to what happened with Brendan Nelson before it went to Turnbull and Abbott, etc., after John Howard was defeated.
Yep.
So we might see what's going on there. What I would like to see, if we are going to get to that change point, is that people are going to have to become organised, like I mentioned earlier, but they're also going to have to become members of political parties to be able to influence, at least put pressure on the rank and file to let them know that there are new ideas coming. So I know people join Labor, Liberal, Nationals, etc., and they don't feel like they can get very far. But if 20,000 people join the Liberals and 20,000 people join the Nationals, that changes a lot. That's not branch stacking. That's just natural stacking, which is that people want to join a political party. Now, they might try and remove you and silence you, etc. Well, then you've just exposed the corruption within those political parties. And if there's enough people still joining, it will eventually overwhelm those political parties and they'll have to change their minds. So that's an interesting component. So I think if I was going to divide 500,000 of us up, I would send 100,000 to the Liberals, 100,000 to the Nationals, and 100,000 to build a third party movement and try and get some form of consolidation. But at some point that has to happen. So this is the point, isn't it? Like, we like to click our fingers and get to an outcome or a result, but reality, there is a lot of work to do. There's a lot of groundwork to do. There's a lot of grassroots work to do, and there's a lot of leadership to do. That's why, and I talk about the idea of a republic as a possibility. So if you simplify that republic idea down, what you're really saying is, why don't we just have as our chief principle a formula to elect our head of state? That is what would excite people, and that moves away from the idea, as Kevin's explaining, that we are technically already a republic. I'm reminded of the words of John Eastman, the constitutional US lawyer, and he says the whole thing about what we're doing is the right or the determination why we had our Declaration of Independence was so that we could govern ourselves and we didn't have a king governing us. Here in Australia, we don't govern ourselves, even though we're supposed to. We are dictated to now. And the COVID era proved that to us. And the fact that you bring in an e-safety commissioner and to use digital ID, etc., these are not governing ourselves. This is being ruled upon in disguise, and in there lies the difference.
Mate, I could talk to you for another 3 hours because I love talking to people that are thought leaders and solutions based. I think people are very good at talking about the problems, but very rarely do they propose solutions. And obviously, sometimes those solutions might not play out exactly like you intend, but at least you're moving in that direction. I think that's very, very important. So I'm conscious of your time today, so I better let you go. But I need to ask you one final question, and that's the most important part of commanding the narrative, and it's called build your own fantasy government. Now, Jason, you're in control of the next Parliament of Australia, and you can choose 5 or 6 people to head up that next Parliament, that next government of Australia. They can be living or dead. They don't have to be politicians. They can be anyone that you choose. Who do you pick?
Oh, this is my favorite question of all time, Steve. I wish I would have had a bit of time to prepare. I'll tell you what I'm going to do. So have I been elected in a certain position? Am I the Prime Minister or something? Is that what this is?
Well, yeah, you can take it that way. It's whichever. I guess what we're really trying to get to is who do you think out there are the leaders that can take take the country in the right place?
Okay. Well, the first thing that I would do is I would get Gerard Rennick to be the treasurer. That would be step one, because we would have a guy in there that knows what's going on. He's going to call it out, and effectively, even though he says there are Doge departments within, they're not functioning properly, but that guy would get to the bottom of that.
Yeah.
Then I would be looking for a new Governor General on the way to becoming the first, inverted commas, president. And that person, I would choose Julian Assange as the first president of Australia. And I think that would signal to the Australian people that we are for truth and transparency, and all good Australians. We all came from convicts, and that's the best convict that I know who shouldn't have been inside. And that's where I would go next. How are we going to be able to negotiate with others overseas? So I mentioned earlier Jacinta Price. I think she'd make a very interesting foreign minister. I just think that the idea of a brilliant, young, beautiful, brilliant, talented woman, perfect to take on the world. I'd like to see Matt Canavan in there in some position. He may well be the Prime Minister. He could be a trade minister. He could be an energy minister. And I'll tell you what, I think he would do very well in that situation. As for people in the past in a real fantasy world, wow. It's funny how you're in history, it changes. Like, I would have thought that I was a big defender of Paul Keating as a treasurer when he was treasurer, because even John Howard said after he lost power, he said, if it wasn't for Keating, I never would have done as well as I had done. Now, things about Keating today, he wouldn't make my team, but that's my point, that these things have changed over time. I don't think I'd bring back any of our previous prime ministers. I think we are beyond that, and I think we would look forward at that point. I know a friend of mine said to me that if she could elect or run any single human being as a candidate in an election and guarantee that they would win, she told me that person would be Glenn McGrath. And I think that's interesting. The former Australian fast bowler. She says everyone loves him.
You know what? We don't think about sports people. I had a counsellor on recently, Peter Rostevsky, and he put someone out there that a little light bulb went above my head. I thought that's a great pick. He said Craig Bellamy, the coach of the Melbourne Storm, because he's spent a lot of time, his whole career, breeding young men and trying to get them to better themselves and become great players, but also great human beings as well. I thought that was a tremendous pick that often gets overlooked. A lot of these coaches that are sitting there would be great politicians in a way.
Well, funny you say that, because when it comes down to it, the one thing that I haven't done in my interviewing work, and I've interviewed hundreds of people, is that I am a cricket nut, and there's 2 that I want on my list, on top of my list, and I'm trying to get to them. One is Ian Chappell, and the other one is Alan Border.
What was the second one?
Alan Border. I think Alan Border is the toughest cricketer I've ever seen. And I think Ian Chappell, I think all professional cricketers owe Ian Chappell a debt of gratitude more than any other living person or deceased. I think no one, I mean, obviously Kerry Packer was the catalyst for that, but it was Ian Chappell that got them there. And I'm desperate to speak to Chappelli, even though he's now since retired, to talk about that as well. And when it comes to football, I think that coach out at Penrith, Ivan Cleary, is something else. And I've actually got his book. It was just next to me. I've just moved it. But I don't buy sports biographies anymore. I haven't got time, but I saw that in one of the department stores the other day, and I pulled it straight off the shelf. I said, that's a book that I've got to read. To win 4 premierships. And I tell you what, he's looking good at number 5. He's an outside chance as well. And if he was to pull that off, that would make him possibly the greatest sports coach certainly we've seen in our lifetimes.
Maybe that's where we're going wrong, because the minor party movement's always looking for this leader to start up a third party. We never think of anyone in the political realm. I know he's dead now, but I'm thinking of Shane Warne. I mean, imagine putting Shane Warne as the head of a political party. That would cause a stir. I'm sure. I mean, there's talent out there. I think maybe we need to start thinking out of the box a little bit. Maybe approaching different areas, not just staying so confined in the I don't want to mention any names, but obviously there's go-to people in the minor party movement, and they just don't get traction with the mainstream Australia. So maybe we need to start thinking outside the box.
Well, this is it. And I am I've 12 years I worked in TV home shopping as a producer. So I've met thousands of people selling products, presenters from all walks of life, all the way up to Dustin Hoffman. These people who've got products to sell. And I'm a casting director in many ways. So when I see someone who's talented, they just stand out. And so it's a very similar thing. And unfortunately, he was defeated again last Sunday. But before Tim lost a fight, Tim Zhu, I'd meet him at some of these fights, and I'd say to him, "Hello, Mr. President." He'd look at me like, "What?" I said, "I think you're going to be president one day." And he says, "Oh, no politics for me." I said, "Not now, Tim, but when you're 40." And we would just laugh and walk away. But where I'm going is that he had a tenacity, a determination within, and that tough Aussie, that Russian blood, of which I share some, impressed me so much, and that resilience. And see, it's the qualities that we seem to be missing, that tenacity, the Australianness, the toughness, the thick skin, the she'll be right, the fair go attitude that has long gone away. Fair go has been replaced by I'm entitled to take something. Like, no, you're not. We're Aussies. We used to pitch in when things went bad. It became a bit of an obsession. We'd all go back into our homes, and then there'd be a flood, and we'd all be out there helping. Now we're just not happy to do a whole lot of things, plus the fact that we've been so piled upon, and all these rain events and floods and damages, etc. It's almost like there's just too much of it. And we're being led to believe that it's one thing, and we know that that's not exactly accurate, and we feel like we've been betrayed. And now, because of the COVID era, we are not treating each other the same way. There is an inherent mistrust and disrespect of our friends, and there are people that will discriminate based on whether you have had or whether you haven't had. And I think that's horrible. We should be beyond that. And the idea that they could shed on me versus how dare you come near me, I might catch something from you. I mean, all of these horrific things of division that shouldn't be there. So who rises above it? I wish Shane Warne was alive. I think that Shane Warne would probably come up with something to embrace people. And unfortunately, he's not. And that's why I really like the idea of reaching out to the toughest old people, oldies that are around there, because they have got something to say. And I will never forget when Alan Border told Dean Jones on 210, when he came off in India, 45 degrees, lost 11 kilos or something on the field, vomiting, and he came off, and Border came running down to the boundary and said, "What are you doing?" He said, "I'm coming off, coach. I'm sick." He says, "If you come off, you're not a bloody Australian. Get back out there." That's the Australia that I grew up in. I know that people are softer today, but that's the Australia that got us to where we are today. And the one that we are now is not the same pathway. It's something else. So maybe the Gen Xers, this generation, the ones that never got promoted for 30 years, that did all the hard work and followed along before the younger guys got in and got promoted over us, are the tough engine room that has yet to get its finest hour. And that's the thing, Steve. I honestly believe, I still don't know what I'm going to do when I grow up, but my finest hour is certainly ahead of me. That is for sure.
No, I completely agree with that. And I think our generation has a huge part to play, because we remember what it was like. We grew up with Alan Border and David Boone and Shane Warne and, tough people like Wally Lewis who would say, get bloody out there again, who are, what are you? And they're just, that was the mentality, and that they were real men. I mean, I look at men now. I'm 40 years old. I don't know how we compare ourselves to David Boone. I mean, he was a real man. I look to my father. I look to him and say, he's a real man. What are we? But I do think we have a role to play, because we remember what it was like during that time. We've grown up with the internet and the technological revolution that, a lot of kids these days, I don't think we appreciate that they've grown up with that and they've been influenced by that. I think we need to, I think we're the generation that really can bring everyone together. And I do think we're a sleeping giant that we haven't got involved yet, and I think we are slowly, and I would love to see more of my friends get involved, because I think they're very talented, and we'll see how that plays out. But mate, I'm conscious of time. I really appreciate you coming on and having the chat. Hopefully we can do it again soon. Please let us know how people can follow you. I guess, is Substack the best place to go?
Yeah, look, a little bit of a consolidation. See, on the screen there, my X is simply at JasonQCitizen1. My Substack is jasonqcitizen.substack.com. That's another easy way to find me. If you are looking for me on Facebook, you'll have to look for my pseudonym, Olby1Qnobi. Thanks, Zucker, for taking me out there. And YouTube, I'm the Olbourne Identity with a Band-Aid over my face. You will find me there.
Q, mate? I need to ask you about the Q bit.
Well, a big fan of that American drop on the chance, but it is a play on John Q. Citizen. I was a citizen journalist when it first came out, and I thought, I am the John Q. Citizen, but I'm a Jason Q. Citizen. And so I wanted to have something that would get people to go, what is he on about? What is that question? But that's really what it is. And yeah, I wonder if that's probably getting me censored just the same. But I tell you what, looking at American politics at the moment, I think those guys over there with the number 17 are batting 1,000. It just seems that everything's falling into line. It's extraordinary.
Yep. All right, mate. We'll let you go. Thank you very much again. Please, everyone, follow Jason. He's a good guy, and don't you got to judge people by the content that they put out. I think so. I mean, you're putting out content all the time, and you're doing tremendous stuff. So keep going, mate. And thanks for coming on. Everyone else, please head to commandingthenarrative.com, sign up there, and you'll get the weekly newsletter. So you catch all our great interviews. We have a lot of people on with some great ideas and thoughts. So. For now, please share this out there, and we'll see you all next time. Bye-bye.